Hi YouTube. I just got back from a Halloween celebration. So I wish to apologize in advance. I take this YouTube video seriously. Today it is actually about how to find your husband. The title, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's very misleading. How to find your husband. I've got 5 steps to finding your husband as it pertains to how I found mine, okay? And I think that how I found mine goes against any and everything that I have foreseen on the internet as it pertains to this topic, which is why I want to kind of share my story and my advice and my guidance, because it's not advice or guidance that I ever received. It's just something that I've kind of stumbled across and discovered worked for me and somehow led me to my Prince Charming. Here we are. And number 1 is to find God. I know it sounds so cliche and stereotypical and definitely not related to Halloween topics. This is just when I decided to record this video and or post it. It's very important because you must value yourself first before you even really enter the realm of finding a significant other or a partner that is going to value you. You must first value yourself. And the best method of value I have found is valuing yourself as a child of Christ and understanding what that entails as a child of Christ. It means you're practically royalty, but it's like an invisible royalty. So like no one on this earth is going to bear witness or really see it. And a lot of people cannot fathom or understand where this confidence comes from. When you're a thick woman, when you're a dark-skinned woman, when you're a chocolate woman, let's say you shave your head, let's say, just a lot of times people don't fathom, where does this woman who is not, doesn't fit the societal standards of beauty that we have proclaimed, where do they get this confidence from? And I don't know whether a lot of the women in society that have developed celebrityism believe in this or believe in God. But for me personally, I can say my confidence, my esteem comes from my relationship with Christ and my relationship with God, and knowing that I am a child of God. Like I'm a child of that. I'm worthy of love. Confidence is important. You've got to love you. You can't expect other people to love you if you don't love you. So that's step 1. And learning what it means to sacrifice self-gratification for that love. So when you actually value yourself and when you understand the sacrifice that God has made for you, the sacrifice of relinquishing certain self-gratifications become just secondary. So step 1 to finding your husband is finding God. And within finding God, you find that self-confidence that you really need. Step 2 to finding your husband is getting comfortable with singleness. And I know it sounds totally opposing to what this whole video is about or supposed to be about. But with that comfort in singleness, and I feel that I don't hear this often, and I want to preface this with, although maintaining faith in your hope and your desire for companionship is important, so is placing God's plan for your life first. And God's plan for your life should definitely come before all selfish desires. 1 Corinthians 7:32. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly things.
how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord.
And I know that we are built for companionship. It is listed in verses. So I am not going against the importance of companionship, but understand also that companionship can be found in family dynamics and relationships. Companionship can be found in friendships. And companionship can be found in your church community, as well as hobbies discovered, or just like past hobbies from your childhood even. But look for that companionship in more healthy and Christ-like ways. And really notice and determine if you are searching for that companionship in romantic relationships without a ring on your finger. I do think that that's important. Like, if you don't have a ring on your finger, you shouldn't be searching for companionship in a romantic relationship. You should be searching for companionship in your Christian groups, in your family dynamics, within your friendships, keeping it platonic. With comfortability in singleness, I feel like you often rid yourself of just a lot of sin and selfish desires. I have found myself in this predicament, and I think a lot of people have found themselves in the predicament of justifying a lot of poor behavior from male counterparts or companions, that maybe you're just in the dating or courting phase of said relationship, and you will justify a lot of actions that you wouldn't ordinarily tolerate because you are so desiring said relationship, or you are so desiring said companionship, and you desire it beyond your self-worth. And the reason why I say God's favor and just having a relationship with Christ is of value and of such importance, as well as just being comfortable with singleness, is because you dodge a lot of those bullets when you find comfort in your single season. When you find comfort in your single season and you just value yourself enough, there's a lot of things that you just will not tolerate and will not put up with. And that is, it's so important, because when you're talking about marriage and when you're talking about a lifelong partner, you have to be very serious about your criteria and what you look for in a husband. It is very important because, you know, women, we become so committed to just a boyfriend. Like, if you know yourself, and I know myself and how I was, you know, and this is just assuming that you're anything like me, you become very committed to your boyfriend, and to the point that you may find yourselves viewing red flags that you just flat out ignore for the sole purpose of saying, hey, this is someone who I have committed myself to, so I'm gonna just ignore these red flags because I really love him, or I really like him, or care about him, or I've already proclaimed to be his girlfriend, which means, you know, depending on what you're dating for, if you're dating for marriage, you might self-proclaim yourself his wife without even having that title or occupying that space. And so that's without occupying the space, okay? That's just how you think naturally, and it's innate for us as women. So when you're really talking about the man that gets down on his knee and proposes to you and actually provides you with the opportunity to occupy that space, and you say yes and you accept it and you walk down the aisle and you say your I do's and you make your promises unto God, okay, there's no turning back. So you have to be very conscious about what you want in a man, not only a man, but specifically in your husband. You have to be very conscious about that.
Colossians 3:12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. I just wanted to place this verse here because I really wanted to put an emphasis on the importance of patience. Do not take matters into your own hands and wait for God.
When you feel comfort in your single season, you will not receive just anything and commit to just anything. Someone who's not actually placing commitment, not actually showing you the value that you deserve, not prepared to financially support or provide for you in just the circumstance of dinner, for example. Someone who is chasing the dream of becoming a famous rapper in a 1 in a million situation, knowing that that is not necessarily liable to provide for a family down the stretch of 2 to 5 years as far as a family is concerned. Like, you'd be more conscious of those things when you find yourself reliant on God, reliant on Christ, and comfortable in your season of singleness. So it is just very important to get comfortable in that season. I just want to say, when I look for videos in relation to finding one's husband, a lot of people post videos and have this determinant, oh, I knew I was ready to get married, or I came upon a place of readiness for marriage when I originally wasn't ready for marriage, or I just saw my husband and I knew it was my husband. Personally, I did not know my husband was my husband when I met him, and I did not know I was ready for marriage when I was proposed to. I didn't know these things. I was very much in the dark, and I got so comfortable in my single phase that I actually proclaimed and foresaw that I would be single for the rest of my life. That's where I was. I had kind of given up. I'd kind of lost hope a little bit, and I just kind of proclaimed God's provision over me. I was like, you know what, Lord? I've had a lot of negative run-ins with men at that point and at this point in my life, and I just said to myself that I wanted him to lead my life. And I still, despite that conversation with him, despite that prayer, despite that recognition, I still was on a downward spiral path. I still wasn't making the right choices in my romantic relationships. But I knew that I wanted significantly for God to lead my life, despite what my desires were. And I said, if you have set aside for me a life of singleness, if that's what you have planned for me, Lord, I'm not going to continue to be selfish and waste my time with men who are not for me. I seek you. That was my mindset. That was my forethought. And I just think when I say get comfortable with singleness, I mean get comfortable with putting God first and with putting God before your own selfish desires. And it's hard. Believe you and me, I know it's hard. But it's the answer and it's the key. It is. Whenever people ask me those crazy questions, what do you think life is all about? And what do you think the key to life is? And the answer to life? What do you think the deeper meaning of life is? The deeper meaning to life is seeking security in Christ outside of your own selfish desires. And romantic relationships and romantic life is literally just the beginning, okay? Okay. So step 3 to finding your husband is holding fast to your expectations of a man and or of your future husband. Be mindful of the things that you want. But I'm going to start off by simply giving you guys my list and expectations in a man prior to my being married. So my expectations were, he must be Christ-like because I wanted a leader. He must be loving. He must be kind. I desired someone who had a good relationship with their family. And that is actually something that I kind of I didn't necessarily forbade on, but one thing that I noticed about my husband is despite circumstances, he chased after his relationship with his family, despite what was maybe done unto him, or, you know, how he may have felt betrayed in ways, like despite differing opinions between him and his family members. He is very much Christ-like in his ways of maintaining his relationships with his family and just doing good unto his family. And it is something that I admired so much. So it's not even necessarily that he just has a good relationship with his family, but just observing how he is with his family and noting that, because how he treats specifically mother-son relationships, how a man treats his mother is very much related to how you can expect to be treated as a wife. I'm not saying it always works out that way, but I'm saying majority of the time. How a man treats his mother, a woman that he seeks nothing from, okay? Someone that's courting you, someone that's dating you, someone that's trying to get you in bed is going to treat you differently versus 20 years into a marriage where you have children that you have to provide for and are responsible for. The romantic surprise and the element of the romance of the beginning of the companionship is gone. 20 years into a marriage, that stuff, that ship has sailed, and now you're just kind of like living life together. And a lot of times when the romance and the sexual attraction and all the fun is gone, what you see as far as a partner who is just living side by side with you, occupying the space and living life and paying bills and handling responsibilities, that's the reality. And so when you see a single man and his relationship with his mother, you can pretty much determine based on how he seeks relationship and companionship with the person that he wants nothing from as far as romance is concerned, you can pretty much determine the type of man you're dealing with. If he's a good man, if he's a respectable man, if he's sound, if he's kind, if he's mature, versus someone who's just seeking to get into your pants. This is an important distinction. And so I really value the relationship that a man has with his mother and with his family. That includes siblings, sisters, brothers. I even pay attention to how when I'm on a date, for example, or when I would be on a date, for example, I would even look at how a man treated a bum on the street. If we were like, and that's a poor description, but let's say like a homeless person that's residing on the street at the time, if they stepped over them with little concern versus if they actually cared enough to say, hey, bro, you okay? Or like, let me spare you $1. How a man treated our waiter or our waitress at the time was a determinant of like his personality and like the type of man that he was. If he was a good person or someone who just used you based on what you could give them in the moment. How quick is he to discuss things of a sexual nature versus how quickly he is to discuss things that one would actually value, okay? What are his morals? What are his values? What is his work ethic? What are his goals? What is his ambition? Where does he see himself in the next 5 to 10 years? Is it realistic? Does he see himself with a wife? Does he value relationships and marriage? And also, you know, if he has goals and ambitions, does he have something to show for his hard work and his rigor as of today? This is something to really consider. Step 4 is just understanding your role as a future wife and mentally and emotionally preparing for that. A part of that is it comes full circle because in the beginning I mentioned how important a relationship with God was and how important it was to sacrifice your innate desires in order to find someone suitable and in order to even just value yourself. When you enter the role of wife and mother, a lot of times you find yourself sacrificing your own selfish desires for the good of your husband and for the good of your family and for the good of your kids. So that practice with sacrifice that you experience during your single season is something that you will practice as a wife and as a mother. And this is why I say it's so important to understand the importance and the value of sacrificing for the glory of God. As a wife, I think some things that are important are just like simple things, like learning how to cook. And that could be true and false for different circumstances. You know, perhaps you've met yourself a chef of a man and you don't really need to learn how to cook. Then by all means, you know, utilize the blessing that has been bestowed upon you. Being pure of heart, being kind, being submissive. And I actually have a little bit of a story time for the submissive thing. Because I think especially within the Black community and for sisters of color, it is very difficult as a woman who was raised in perhaps a female-led household, and just being a woman who thrives in independence, finding yourself in a position submitting to a man. So I asked my husband after he proposed to me, so this is during our fiance phase, I said, what made you decide that I was wifey material enough for you to go out, buy the ring, do the things necessary to propose and make me your wife? And he said there was a moment. We took a trip to Florida during one of my girlfriend's birthday celebrations. We went to Florida and we went on this like luminescent paddleboard activity. He was leading the kayak and he rowed us into a bush. He backed me into a bush. Mosquitoes were biting my back. Like, it was actually horrific. And I said, I was trying to paddle against him. He was paddling and I was paddling, but we were paddling against one another to the point that we weren't going anywhere. We weren't making any progress. And I stopped paddling. I left my paddle in the middle of my lap. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to let you lead. I was kind of being sarcastic and joking, but also serious in the same sense. Anyways, when I asked him, what made you decide to make me your wife? He said, the moment that you told me, I will let you lead, when we were in that kayak in Florida. That was when he knew that he wanted me to be his wife. Now, upon further deliberation, he brought up other moments of recollection where he was like, oh yeah, I want this to be my wife. But when I first asked him, that was his very first answer. And so I believe it, and I believe it to be true, that was the moment that he realized that I was quote unquote wifey material. The moment that I verbally requested that he lead me was the moment that he realized that I was someone that he wanted to make his wife. And I want that to be heard, and I want that to be understood for all my independent women out there and all my single women out there who find it difficult to allow a man to lead them. In order to be a wife, you also must have self-control like a wife, which is led by that selflessness, which is led by God, your devotion to Him, and your ability to relinquish your own selfish desires. But self-control, as well as dressing like a wife, which I'm not a great representation of that right now. But dressing like a wife. I think that it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the more of your body that you reveal and relinquish to the world, the easier it is to attract a man. And yes, a part of that is true. It is much easier to attract men, plural, upon being a little more promiscuous in your attire. But when you are talking about attracting your husband and attracting the right man, and a man who is suitable to occupy the role of father, husband, and head of household, I think it best that you aspire to dress like a wife, because that is the role that you wish to occupy, and therefore you attract a man who wishes to attract a wife, if that makes sense. So dress like the role that you aspire to be. Again, it is Halloween. I am not a great representation of that. And I am also still working on clearing out my closet and making room for wifely attire. So God is still working on me in that realm. So forgive me if I am not practicing everything that I preach as I make this discussion. But that is one thing that I will say I aspire to do and did shift as I was occupying the dating space, is like making sure that I dressed like a wife and a respectable woman, and like a woman who wished to be respected. So all of these things are of importance, and just understanding what your expectation as a woman, as a wife, and as a future mother, what that looks like, and actually preparing yourself for that space. This is not necessarily how to meet your husband, but just like dating tips at this point. So dating tip and or how to meet your husband rule number 5. Please be very clear about what you want as you are dating. When I talk about dodging those red flags and preventing yourself from ending up in situationships for long periods of time to where you prevent yourself from meeting your future husband because you've spent 6 years in a wasted relationship, 10 years in a wasted relationship because you did not value yourself enough to avoid the circumstance, be very clear with the person that you are entertaining about what your expectations are. If you wish or desire to be a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home mother, be very clear about that. If you wish to marry, be very clear about that. If you are dating in search of your husband, be very clear and concise about that. Do not hesitate to admit or acknowledge your goals, because the moment that a man runs from your expectations is the moment that you notice and should realize that he is not intended for you and that he is not your husband. Bottom line, if you're looking for your husband, get comfortable in your season of singleness. Enjoy it. Embrace it. And when you do meet the man that is designed to lead you in a positive and uplifting direction towards God, embrace him. And by all means, allow him to lead you. I hope this advice was well received, despite some of the hypocrisy. Thank you for watching.